I'm with James Walsh, who's the Senior Policy Advisor at the NAPF on workplace pensions. And we're going to talk today about some of the pan-European and cross-border issues that are affecting the world of occupational pensions. James, thanks very much for coming.
My pleasure.
Europe wants to get more involved with what we're doing. They want to send us their providers of services, investment services, fiduciary management, whatever it is, anything to do with pension schemes. They want to increase their involvement in regulation of pension schemes. Isn't this just another layer of interference on top of the heavy regulation that we have in the UK?
Well, there's a number of things going on there, Brian. I think new players coming into the UK pensions market can only be a good thing if they bring new ideas, innovation, increased competition that drives down charges and costs for members and improves services, then that's great, and we should welcome that. What we'd be very concerned about at the NAPF, in fact we are concerned about, is proposals for new, more burdensome regulation that's going to make it more difficult to provide pension schemes. And that's why the debate we're seeing at the moment about a new version of the directive on institutions for occupational retirement provision, the Pensions Directive, or IORP Directive, as some of your viewers will know it. That's why we're so concerned about that, because that's really got the potential to drive up the cost of providing pension schemes.
Okay, well, apart from the fact that its full title sounds a real turn-off, and the average hard-working pension trustee might be forgiven for letting it flow across their head, can you sort of explain, for the benefit of our viewers, what you mean by a new pensions directive, and why, from the sound of it, you might be pretty concerned?
Well, we've had this directive in place since 2003, which may not sound like a very long time to you and me. But in the world of the EU, we've now got to the sort of stage in the process where they're thinking about a new version of the directive. And particularly, there's a general review in the EU of all financial services regulation following the crash of 2 or 3 years ago. We've seen the Solvency II directive brought in for the insurance sector, which broadly requires insurers to hold more money on their books in case of a crash or unexpected difficulty. So now the Commission is asking, should we take that Solvency II type approach that applies for insurers and apply it to pension schemes, to add into the Pensions Directive chunks of that Solvency II legislation? Now, our concern at the National Association of Pension Funds is that pensions are very different from insurance. And it's wrong to say that a piece of legislation designed for insurers should simply be applied to pensions. That's what we're trying to resist.
Well, in principle terms, one could be forgiven for thinking that a pension scheme is an insurance of an individual's old age, and that a pension fund needs to be well financed and hopefully have reserves in order to meet the liabilities. Is it as simplistic as that in the minds of the EU?
I think one of the difficulties we've got is that UK pension schemes are quite distinctive in character. In fact, it's really only the UK, the Netherlands and Ireland that have this tradition of providing defined benefit funded pension schemes. So our first challenge is to ensure that the policymakers in Brussels, whether that's in the European Commission or the MEPs in the European Parliament, really understand how our pension system works. But of course, you're right, pension schemes need to be well funded, but we've got a good funding regime in the UK that ensures there's good protection for members' benefits. We've got what we call the employer covenant, the employer's commitment to funding a pension scheme. We've got the role the pensions regulator provides. They don't hesitate to step in if a company isn't putting in the contributions that it ought to. And then we've got the Pension Protection Fund that provides a now quite well tried and tested backstop when a scheme goes bust. So we've got a good set of protections for members' benefits. We don't think we need to add something extra on top of that, which would almost certainly drive up the cost of providing pensions.
Right. And how are you getting these views across to Europe?
Well, we're lobbying. We're lobbying directly by putting our viewpoints to the officials in the Commission who are drawing up the new policy. We've got good links with a number of UK MEPs in the Parliament, many of whom have been really helpful to us actually, and good allies. And of course we're lobbying in concert with our European allies. We work through the European Federation for Retirement Provision, our umbrella body if you like at EU level. And of course in the EU that multinational approach is very often the best way to go. You don't get terribly far in Brussels by just representing a single national interest. Sometimes it's easy for Commission officials to say, well, that's the UK. They're always saying no. So if we can work together with our continental colleagues, then we're likely to get some traction. The other thing we're doing, of course, is joining up with colleagues in other organisations in the UK. And in this issue, we're very much on the same page as the CBI, the TUC, we're working with the Association of British Insurers, and of course with the government as well. And the Treasury and the Department of Work and Pensions are taking a very close interest in this issue. They see it as really important.
Some would say that there's nothing wrong with saying no to the Europeans, picking up on your point.
Well, sometimes, yes, you say no. It's often more effective to say no, and here's an alternative plan. Here's a different way of achieving the objective. Because, of course, the Commission's objective is a sound one. They want to see people's pensions being secure and well protected, and wouldn't we all? The question is, how do you get to that end?
Well, some would argue that there's plenty, if not too much, regulation of pension funding in this country already. So on that basis, it seems that we are on the same page.
Good.
Can I just ask you a question about the current state of public sector pension reform? The original Hutton report was welcomed on all sides, not least by the NAPF. And yet already there seemed to be some concern that the homogeneous nature of what he proposed is being diluted a bit, split down, and the government is now talking about allowing different segments of the public sector to negotiate separately. They're talking about slowing down the pace of reform. Is this political reality, do you think, or are we in another one of these situations where much is promised but not enough is delivered?
Well, I don't think the recent developments are such a surprise as you suggest. I mean, it was always the case that at some point you'd have to start to ask how public sector pensions should change on a scheme-by-scheme basis. I mean, that is absolutely logical. But I think the Hutton settlement, if I can put it that way, is a good one. It's a fair and balanced package that strikes the right balance between maintaining good quality pensions in the public sector, and let's face it, these will still be, by any benchmark, very good pensions, but also ensuring that it's affordable for future generations of taxpayers. So we think overall it's a pretty fair settlement.
What I was being concerned about was a government that in recent times appears to have become somewhat embattled, appearing to moderate, defer, water down some of the proposals in the face of determined opposition from the trade unions in particular.
Well, there may be a bit of political posturing, presentation going on, but I don't think the fundamental issues have really changed. The Hutton reforms are still being taken forwards. We're going to move into scheme-by-scheme decision-making in the autumn. I think that was always expected. So, I mean, you may be right that there's a bit of a moderation in some of the language and so on, but I don't think there's a change in the substance.
Okay, thank you very much for that, James. Thanks for coming and talking to us today.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation. Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay. Goodbye.